You think you know California. Beaches, Hollywood, endless sun. But you have no idea what's underneath it. One of the most beautiful states in America is, in fact, hiding something deeply disturbing. Take a lake that's drying into poison dust. Dust that's measurably shrinking the lungs of the children who live beside it. Or the 27,000 barrels of a banned chemical resting on the seafloor, 12 miles off the coast. Or the farmland feeding a quarter of the country, sinking into the ground it grows on, already 28 feet down and falling faster every year. Here are 25 disturbing facts that will either surprise you or unsettle you, and by fact 10, you'll see what's sealed on a public California beach that no one is allowed to open, inspect, or move. Let's dive in. 25. What's in the dust? There's a fungus living in California's soil you can catch just by breathing on the wrong day. It's called coccidioides, and it grows in the dry ground of the Central Valley and Central Coast. The moment that soil is disturbed, by wind, by farming, by a wildfire crew cutting a containment line, the spores go airborne. Breathe them in, and they can take root in your lungs. Most cases stay mild, but in the 1 to 5% where it spreads to the bones, the spine, or the brain, the untreated form kills roughly a quarter to a third of the people it reaches. California logged nearly 12,500 cases in 2024, the most ever recorded, and up 37% in a single year. Cases have grown more than tenfold since 2000, spreading like a wildfire that burns underground, in the soil, instead of across it. State fire crews now get specific valley fever warnings because digging is how you breathe it, and it's creeping north into counties that never used to see it. You don't have to touch anything. You just have to breathe the wrong gust of wind. 24. The green killing field. One of America's first wind farms was built directly on top of the densest population of golden eagles in North America. It has been killing them ever since. Altamont Pass, east of the Bay Area, went up in the early 1980s. Thousands of small, fast-spinning lattice-frame turbines planted across a corridor the eagles hunt through, drawn there by the ground squirrels. A peer-reviewed study by biologist Sean Smallwood estimated it kills 67 golden eagles a year, and earlier state figures put total bird deaths as high as 4,700, including burrowing owls, red-tailed hawks, and kestrels. Killing one golden eagle without a federal permit carries fines up to $100,000. The killing has continued for more than 40 years. By the conservative count, that's over 2,500 eagles, roughly half of California's entire breeding population. We built the clean energy future on the one ridgeline the eagles couldn't afford to lose. 23. Protected on paper. There's a lake in the eastern Sierra a court ordered saved more than 30 years ago. It's still dying. Mono Lake is about 1 million years old, fed by streams off the Sierra Nevada until 1941, when Los Angeles began draining those streams down its aqueduct. The lake dropped 45 vertical feet, and a land bridge opened to Neggett Island that let coyotes walk out and devastate its nesting gull colonies. After a long fight led by the Mono Lake Committee and the Audubon Society, the State Water Board issued Decision 1631 in 1994. The lake had to climb back to 6,392 feet. As of late 2025, it sat near 6,382, almost 10 feet short 3 decades on. Los Angeles still takes the legal maximum, 16,000 acre-feet a year, and a 2026 UCLA model put the odds of the lake ever reaching its target at about 1 in 3. A court ordered it to recover. 30 years later, it's still waiting. 22. Permitted poison. California didn't just fail to stop one of its worst toxic dumps. The state approved it. In 1956, a businessman named James Stringfellow proposed a waste site in Pyrite Canyon near present-day Jurupa Valley, and the Regional Water Board permitted it. Over the next 16 years, about 34 million gallons of acids, solvents, and heavy metals, chromium, lead, cadmium, were poured into unlined pits, nothing between the poison and the groundwater. By 1969, they were overflowing, and toxic runoff washed down the creek that drained straight through the neighborhood of Glen Avon, where children later played in the foam. The EPA ranked it the most contaminated site in the state and made it one of the very first Superfund sites in the country. The cleanup estimate, by the state's own toxics agency, about 500 years. The agency that permitted that pit in 1956 will still be cleaning it well past the year 2500. 21. The lung-shrinking lake. California's largest lake is drying up, and as it shrinks, it is measurably shrinking the lungs of the children beside it. The Salton Sea covers 343 square miles, created by accident in 1905 when an irrigation canal broke. Decades of farm runoff were its only water source, runoff carrying arsenic, selenium, and old DDT. As that water stopped coming, the lake pulled back and exposed about 78 square miles of poisoned bed, roughly the footprint of Washington, D.C., and the desert wind lifts it into fine, toxic dust. A 2024 study of 731 local children found 24% had asthma, about 3 times the national rate. It's in their lungs right now. 20. The plume that won't stop. The town from Erin Brockovich won its famous case 30 years ago. The poison underneath it never stopped moving. Hinckley sits out in the Mojave, and from 1952 to 1966, the utility PG&E dumped roughly 370 million gallons of water laced with chromium-6, a carcinogen, into unlined ponds. The company knew by the mid-1960s. It didn't tell regulators until 1987, 21 years later. Erin Brockovich, a legal clerk, not the lawyer, built the case for the firm of Ed Masry, and the 1996 settlement ran to $333 million. But that money paid the victims. It never funded a cleanup of the water itself. In 2023, a federal survey had to redraw the map because the plume had spread past its old edges, about 8 miles long, 2 miles wide, still monitored in 2026. The movie ended in 1996. The plume didn't. 19. The sinking breadbasket. The single most productive farmland in America is collapsing into the ground it grows on. The San Joaquin Valley grows close to a quarter of the nation's food, and for a century, it's done it by pumping groundwater faster than nature replaces it. When that water comes out, the clay layers underground compact like a squeezed sponge, and the surface drops. Near the town of Mendota, the land has fallen about 28 feet since the 1920s, the height of a 3-story building. There's a famous geological survey photo of a pole marked with where the ground used to be, far overhead. In 2024, Stanford geophysicists Matthew Lees and Rosemary Knight reported the valley lost as much land volume between 2006 and 2022 as it did in the entire mid-20th century, in just 16 years. And the clay cannot re-expand. Once it's down, it's down. The ground that feeds the country is quietly swallowing itself, and there is no putting it back. 18. 12 miles out. 12 miles off one of the most photographed coastlines on Earth, the seafloor is carpeted with barrels of a poison the world banned. Between the Palos Verdes, Shelf, and Catalina Island, scientists from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography mapped the bottom in 2021 and counted more than 27,000 barrel-like objects scattered across a patch of seafloor larger than the city of San Francisco. They were dumped by Montrose Chemical, the largest DDT manufacturer in the country, which ran waste out to this deep channel from the 1940s into 1982. The barrels may hold somewhere between 350 and 700 tons of DDT, and a 2022 federal review found much of the acid waste wasn't even in barrels. It was simply poured into the water. The chemical has since turned up in sea lions, condors, and the white sharks that nurse their young near Catalina. It was banned in 1972. It never left. It just sank out of sight. 17. The Drowned Valley. There is a second Yosemite Valley, and you will never see it, because a city put it underwater on purpose. Hetch Hetchy was a glacial valley in the northern reaches of Yosemite National Park. Granite walls, waterfalls, a meadow floor. The naturalist John Muir fought to save it and called it a temple. He lost. In December 1913, Congress passed the Raker Act, signed by President Woodrow Wilson, not Theodore Roosevelt, as people often assume, allowing San Francisco to build a dam inside a national park to secure its drinking water. The O'Shaughnessy Dam was finished in 1923, 312 feet of concrete, and the valley vanished under roughly 300 feet of reservoir. Muir died in 1914, a year after losing. It has been underwater for over a century. When you stand in Yosemite Valley today, you are looking at the one that survived. 16. They were warned. America's tallest dam nearly let go in 2017, and the failure had been predicted in writing 12 years earlier. Oroville Dam stands 770 feet and holds back water bound for 27 million people. In February 2017, after heavy rain, its main spillway tore open a crater, and when water spilled onto the backup spillway, that one began washing away too. Because it wasn't a spillway at all, just a bare earthen hillside. Roughly 188,000 people downstream were ordered out in a matter of hours. Here's the part that stings. Back in 2005, 3 environmental groups, Friends of the River, the Sierra Club, and the South Yuba River Citizens League, formally warned federal regulators that this exact hillside would fail under heavy flow. The regulators decided it would perform as designed. The repair cost about $1.1 billion. The dam itself held. The warning that could have prevented it was filed, read, and dismissed. 15. The sanctuary on top of a dump. One of the most protected marine environments on the West Coast was built directly over the nation's first and largest offshore nuclear waste dump. From 1946 to 1970, the Atomic Energy Commission used the seafloor about 30 miles west of the Golden Gate as a disposal ground for radioactive waste. Roughly 47,800 drums and containers, according to a 2001 Geological Survey report. When some of the barrels stubbornly floated instead of sinking, Navy crews reportedly shot holes in them with deck guns to send them down. They also sank an entire ship there. The USS Independence, an aircraft carrier irradiated in the Bikini Atoll bomb tests. In 1981, the whole area became the Gulf of the Farallones National Marine Sanctuary, home to white sharks and humpback whales. Much of the dump has never been fully surveyed. We turned it into a sanctuary without ever finishing the count of what's down there. Quick thing before we keep going. Honestly, the comments on these are better than the video. Every time, someone drops a detail I didn't know. So if you've got one, leave it. Tell us what we missed. And a hit of that subscribe button will help a lot. Thanks a lot. Okay, back to it. 14. Forever in the water. There's a class of chemical in California's groundwater that does not break down, does not leave, and is linked to cancer. And it's been leaking from dozens of military bases. They're called PFAS, forever chemicals, built around one of the strongest bonds in chemistry, which is exactly why nothing in nature breaks them apart. For decades, the military sprayed them in firefighting foam to put out jet fuel fires, training exercise after training exercise, soaking the ground. By 2020, California had identified 62 military sites with known or suspected PFAS releases. Travis, Camp Pendleton, Edwards among them. They're tied to kidney and testicular cancer, thyroid disease, and immune suppression. And in 2024, the EPA set its first enforceable limit at 4 parts per trillion, a threshold so low that water once called clean is now, by law, contaminated. We sprayed them for 50 years before we learned they never wash out. 13. The bowl below the sea. The drinking water for 2/3 of California runs through a maze of islands that sit below sea level, held back by earthen walls built before engineering was a profession. The Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta isn't really a delta. It's 57 low-lying farm islands, many of them 10 to 25 feet beneath the water around them, ringed by more than 1,000 miles of levees, mostly thrown up by hand between the 1860s and 1920s. The Geological Survey has flagged the obvious problem. A single moderate earthquake on a Bay Area fault could collapse multiple islands at once, and saltwater from San Francisco Bay would rush inland into the freshwater channels. That would shut off the water supply for roughly 25 million people, for months, maybe years. 25 million people's water sits behind hand-piled dirt that predates the Model T. One bad quake and the ocean walks in. 12. The Lake LA killed. Los Angeles drained a 100-square-mile lake so thoroughly that what's left is the single worst source of dust pollution in the United States. Owens Lake, on the east side of the Sierra, was a living saltwater lake until 1913, when the Los Angeles Aqueduct diverted the river feeding it 233 miles south to the city. By 1926, the lake was gone, a dry, cracked playa of salt and old sediment laced with arsenic and cadmium. The wind tears that dust off the lakebed in choking clouds, and a National Academy of Sciences panel named it the highest source of hazardous particulate dust in the country. Los Angeles has spent about $2.1 billion trying to hold the dust down with shallow water and gravel, the most expensive dust control project in American history, and it still isn't fully solved. They took the water, they left the poison behind. 11. Where rescue can't reach. There is a place in California where on a summer afternoon, you can collapse and the helicopter coming to save you cannot physically take off. Death Valley holds the highest air temperature ever reliably measured on Earth, 134 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded in 1913. That record is now being challenged by a 2025 study, but the official mark still stands, and the modern danger isn't in dispute. When ground-level heat climbs past about 120 degrees, the air thins until rotor blades can't generate enough lift, and rescue helicopters are grounded. In the summer of 2024 alone, the heat killed hikers in the park. One man dead on a trail when it hit 119 degrees. While emergency flight crews in the region had to cancel calls because the air was simply too hot to fly. The land doesn't need to trap you. It just has to wait until the rescue can't come. 10. Sealed on the beach. On a public beach between San Diego and Los Angeles, about 1,400 tons of high-level nuclear waste sit in canisters that cannot be opened, cannot be inspected inside, and have nowhere to go. This is San Onofre, a power plant shut down in 2013. Its spent fuel, some of the most dangerous material on Earth, was sealed into more than 100 stainless steel canisters and lowered into a concrete vault a few feet from the Pacific, in an earthquake zone, below the level a big storm surge could reach. During the loading in 2018, one 50-ton canister was nearly dropped, catching within 1/8 of an inch of a fall that had never been tested for. The walls are 5/8 of an inch thick. There is still no national repository to move them to. Yucca Mountain was canceled, so they stay, sealed on a beach, indefinitely, because the country built the waste before it built anywhere to put it. 9. The day the harbor exploded. The deadliest homefront disaster of World War II happened in California, and the country spent 80 years refusing to call it what it was. On July 17, 1944, at Port Chicago on the Sacramento River, roughly 5,000 tons of munitions detonated while being loaded onto ships, a blast about 1/3 the force of the atomic bomb that would fall on Hiroshima a year later. It killed 320 men instantly, 2/3 of them black sailors, assigned the dangerous loading work because the Navy was segregated. It was felt 50 miles away and shattered windows in San Francisco. When the surviving black sailors were ordered straight back to the same unsafe work with no changes, 50 refused. The Navy convicted them of mutiny. Thurgood Marshall, then with the NAACP, called it a frame-up. It took until July 17, 2024, exactly 80 years later, for the Navy to formally exonerate all 258 men it had charged. Most of them did not live to hear it. They had done the most dangerous work in the Navy, asked only to be kept safe, and were branded mutineers for it. And the country took 80 years to agree they had been right all along. 8. The mountain on the watch list. The most beautiful mountain in Northern California is on the federal government's short list of the most dangerous volcanoes in America. Mount Shasta rises 14,179 feet over the top of the state, and the Geological Survey rates it very high threat, the same tier as Mount St. Helens, which leveled itself in 1980. It's not extinct, just quiet. It has erupted roughly every 600 to 800 years, and the last confirmed eruption was around 1250, with possible activity as late as 1786. When it goes, the hazard isn't just lava, it's lahars, fast rivers of volcanic mud that can run 30 miles or more down the valleys toward the towns of Weed, Mount Shasta City, and McLeod. Interstate 5, the West Coast's main artery, runs about 10 miles from the summit. People photograph it. Almost none of them know they're photographing a loaded gun. 7. The East Bay Time Bomb. The most dangerous fault in the Bay Area doesn't run out in the empty hills. It runs directly under the homes of millions of people. The Hayward Fault cuts 74 miles straight through Oakland, Berkeley, Fremont, and Hayward, passing beneath hospitals, water mains, BART tunnels, and the football stadium at UC Berkeley, which was built right on top of it and is slowly being torn apart by the creeping ground. The last major rupture, in 1868, was once called the Great San Francisco Earthquake, until 1906 stole the title. The Geological Survey calls Hayward a tectonic time bomb, and puts the odds of a magnitude 6.7 or larger before 2043 at about 1 in 3. In 1868, the Bay Area held 250,000 people. Today, it holds nearly 8 million. The fault hasn't changed. Everything we built on top of it has. 6. The supervolcano you can ski. People take ski vacations on the rim of a supervolcano, most of them with no idea what's under the snow. Long Valley Caldera in the eastern Sierra is a basin 20 miles long and 11 wide, blown out about 760,000 years ago by an eruption that hurled out roughly 600 cubic kilometers of magma, something like 2,000 times the size of the 1980 Mount St. Helens blast, and dusted most of the western United States in ash. It is not dead. The floor of the caldera has been bulging upward as magma shifts below. Swarms of earthquakes rattle it, and hot springs and carbon dioxide vents leak across it. Mammoth Mountain, one of California's busiest ski resorts, sits right on its edge. The chairlift runs. The magma chamber is still there. Both things are true at once. 5. As often as it shakes. Californians brace for earthquakes. Almost none of them know the state erupts about as often as it quakes. That's not a turn of phrase. It's the Geological Survey's own framing. Volcanic eruptions happen in California about as frequently as the largest earthquakes on the San Andreas. There have been at least 10 eruptions in the past 1,000 years, the most recent in living memory, and the agency monitors 15 separate volcanic centers up and down the state. That averages out to roughly 1 eruption a century. The quiet since the last one isn't safety. It's just one ordinary gap in a long, regular rhythm. A state that fears one kind of disaster has been quietly running on 2, and it only ever planned for the one it could feel. 4. The volcano in living memory. People treat California volcanoes as ancient history. One of them erupted while your great-grandparents were alive, and the government says the next one is a certainty, not a maybe. Lassen Peak in the state's north began erupting in 1914 and kept going for 3 years. On May 22, 1915, it blew a column of ash more than 30,000 feet into the sky, airline cruising altitude, and sent it drifting nearly 200 miles east into Nevada. A wall of volcanic mud roared down Hat Creek in the night. A man named Elmer Saran was woken by his dog and ran a mile in the dark to warn the neighbors. It was the last eruption in the lower 48 until Mount St. Helens 63 years later. Today, about 600,000 people a year hike the park around it, past steaming vents and boiling mud pots. The Geological Survey's word for the next eruption isn't if, it's inevitable. 3. 169 years. The southern San Andreas is the most famous fault in the world, and it is dangerously, measurably overdue. It last ruptured in 1857 in the Fort Tejon earthquake, a magnitude 7.9 that tore the ground for 270 miles and slipped the Earth sideways by up to 30 feet. The geologic record at Wrightwood shows this section breaks roughly every 100 years or so. It has now been 169. The fault runs within about 35 miles of downtown Los Angeles, and the Geological Survey's own scenario for a rupture today estimates around 1,800 dead, 50,000 injured, and over $200 billion in damage. A fault that skips its turn doesn't grow safer. It just keeps loading. Every year the ground stays still, it is winding tighter. 2 at once. There is a worse scenario than California's big one, and it's California's big one arriving at the same time as the Pacific Northwest's. Off the northern coast lies the Cascadia subduction zone, capable of a magnitude 9, more than 30 times stronger than the fault under Los Angeles. For years, these were treated as separate threats. Then, in 2025, a study led by Oregon State paleoseismologist Chris Goldfinger laid out evidence that Cascadia and the northern San Andreas have ruptured in tandem, within minutes to hours of each other, at least 3 times in the past 1,500 years. It's new science, still being weighed, but if it holds, the Pacific Northwest's catastrophe could trigger California's before the first emergency crews have even finished their assessment. 2 coastlines, 2 faults, 1 trigger pull. We planned for them one at a time. The Earth may not take them one at a time. 1. It already happened. We've been circling the real fear this whole time, and here it is. The worst-case earthquake on this coast is not a prediction. It's history. On the night of January 26, 1700, The Cascadia zone ruptured at full magnitude 9. We can date it almost to the hour because the tsunami it threw across the Pacific reached Japan the next day, and officials there wrote down the wave that arrived with no earthquake behind it, an orphan tsunami. Along the American coast, forests dropped into the sea and drowned where they stood. And native oral histories tell of a night the ground shook and the ocean came in. The newest evidence suggests the northern San Andreas let go in the same window, that California and the Northwest convulsed together, and a wall of water crossed an entire ocean. Cascadia averages a rupture every 200 to 500 years. It has now been 326. The 2011 tsunami that killed nearly 20,000 people in Japan came off a fault just like this one, except Japan had spent decades building seawalls and running drills, and this coast has not. The most dangerous thing about California isn't that the worst case is coming, it's that it has already come once, on a date we can name, and the clock that set it has been ticking, quietly, ever since. So that's California, the most beautiful state in America, hiding 25 deeply disturbing things just beneath the surface. Which one got under your skin? Drop it below. Thanks for watching.